Okay, so we hear a lot about the rise of China, right? But what about its actual money, the yuan? It's sitting right at the center of this huge unfolding story about the future of the entire global economy. And to really get a handle on where it's all going, we first have to understand where it came from. And I mean all the way back to its ancient roots.
For as long as most of us can remember, the US dollar has been, well, the undisputed king of global finance. But that's starting to shift. Now, we're not talking about some sudden collapse, but as this quote from our source puts it, an evolutionary transition. The world is slowly moving toward a system with multiple major currencies. And in that story, China's yuan is definitely a main character.
So, let's start with what's happening right now. China's big push to make the yuan a global player isn't some kind of accident. Oh no, it's a very deliberate and actually pretty recent ambition, and it's all being driven by a crystal-clear strategy.
You can really see this strategy kick into high gear right after the 2008 financial crisis. First, in November of that year, the G20 essentially gave China a much bigger seat at the economic table. Then, just a few months later, its central bank chief was openly calling for a whole new global currency system. But the real symbolic knockout punch? That came in 2016, when the yuan joined the IMF's super-exclusive currency club, a huge signal of China's global ambitions.
But here's where we take a really interesting turn. To truly understand China's modern-day currency strategy, we actually have to dig into its history with money. And believe me, that history goes back thousands and thousands of years.
So let's hit rewind. And I mean way, way back. Because to understand China's modern view of money, you really need to look at the origins of currency itself, in one of the world's oldest civilizations.
Long before we had metal coins or paper money or anything like that, the cowrie shell was one of China's first forms of currency. I mean, they were beautiful, they were pretty rare, and you could carry them around. They started out as just decorations, but that ornamental value made them a perfect medium of exchange.
And this, right here, is a huge step in the history of money anywhere in the world. It's that moment when a pretty object becomes a standardized unit of value. When real cowrie shells got hard to find, people just started making their own imitations out of bone, stone, and then eventually bronze. This was a total game changer. Money was now something you could manufacture.
And once you start manufacturing money, well, that leads to this incredibly powerful realization, one that has shaped Chinese history for millennia. If you control the money, you control the state. Just look at China's first emperor, Qin Shi Huang. For him, unifying the entire empire wasn't just about armies and building walls, it was about creating a single cohesive system. Yeah, he standardized weights and measures, and even the writing system, but crucially, he standardized the currency. Forcing everyone, everywhere, to use the exact same coins was a genius way to break down old regional loyalties and cement his power at the center.
And this slide just perfectly illustrates the connection between the past and the present. On the left, you've got an ancient limestone mold, a physical tool for controlling the creation of money thousands of years ago. And on the right, a modern financial term, managed convertibility. They seem like they're worlds apart, but trust me, they come from the exact same core idea. The state must control its money.
So what on earth is managed convertibility? Well, it's China's policy today. In simple terms, it means the yuan can be used internationally, sure, but Beijing keeps a really tight leash on how much money can flow in and out of the country. It's like a modern digital version of that ancient, deep-seated desire to control the monetary system.
But, controlling currency isn't just about economic spreadsheets and management. It has always been about something more, a powerful symbol of sovereignty and prestige.
Just think about it. Back in ancient China, the coins in your pocket weren't just for buying rice. Their unique shape, their special markings, they were a constant physical reminder of the emperor's authority. They were little tangible pieces of state power, and people accepted them because they were backed by the guy in charge.
This brings us to a really fascinating question for our modern world, right? How do you show that kind of authority on a global scale? What's the 21st century equivalent of an emperor's coin being accepted everywhere?
Well, it looks something like this. It means being accepted not just inside your own borders, but by the entire international community, as a fundamental pillar of the global financial system.
And this is that table, the IMF's Special Drawing Rights, or the SDR basket. The easiest way to think of it is as a super currency used by the world's central banks. Its value is based on a pool of the most important currencies on Earth. For years, that exclusive club only had the US dollar, the euro, the Japanese yen, and the British pound. But in 2016, the Chinese yuan was added. This was that huge symbolic victory we talked about, the world officially saying, yep, China's currency now matters on the global stage.
So they got into the club. Mission accomplished, right? Has the yuan basically taken over the world? Well, let's jump back to the present and see where things really stand.
This slide really lays out the two sides of the coin, so to speak. On one hand, the yuan is an absolute regional powerhouse. It's used heavily for trade all across Asia. But on the other hand, it's not yet a true global challenger. And the reason why goes all the way back to that historical impulse for control. Those modern capital controls that manage convertibility, they prevent the yuan from being used freely enough to really compete with the dollar worldwide.
So here's the real takeaway. The world is changing. It is moving away from total dollar dominance. But this isn't a revolution. It's a slow, evolutionary process. The rise of the yuan is a massive part of that journey, but it's a marathon, not a sprint.
And that leaves us with one last big thought to chew on. For thousands of years, China has shown this incredible ability to shape and control its own currency, to build and unify its state. The question for the 21st century is whether it can, or even really wants to, apply that same influence to the entire global monetary system, and what that's going to mean for the rest of us.